Hello folks, welcome to my channel Java Demystified by SSR. So this channel we will be discussing Java interview question and answers. Let's start with the first question. Question number 1. The most frequently asked question in Java interviews. The first and foremost the question to be asked in any Java interviews is why main method is public static void main. Why this main method has to be written as public static void main. This is an important question as uh, if you see in C and C++, a program begins with a main method and we will write as void main or int main. But in Java, to begin with your main, to begin with your execution of your application, so you have to write public static void main. Why we have to write that? Okay, so let's understand the details. Let's demystify this particular question with a program and other relevant related information. So let's start actually. Okay, so let me write the code actually. So I'm using an editor that is Sublime Text. So one of the good editors, I love it. And here, so let me write a class actually, a test class. So this test class contains the main method. So you know in Java we have two kinds of classes, executable classes and non-executable classes. So executable classes will have main method. So that is also called a main class. Now here the test class is a main class. Non-executable classes means you can write classes with so many business methods and etc. But directly those classes are not getting executed. Okay, so the main method actually forms the starting point in Java. So not only in Java, in other languages, if you see C and C++ also, the main method forms the starting point. So here in Java, the main method is written like this: public static void main, and main actually takes an array that is a string array as an argument. Okay, so that is mandatory actually. Okay, this is the main method. Here in the main method, usually in Java what we do is we usually invoke methods which we have written in class or other classes. If they are static methods, straight away we are calling them, and if they are non-static, because since main method is static method, I cannot access non-static in static as per the Java rules. So we have to create objects, and through objects we have to invoke the business methods of any class or this particular class. So for this particular program, so I am just writing a simple statement to print some message actually to my monitor, to the console monitor. So for that we require system.out.println, and I'm just saying hello world. Okay, so I'm just saying hi to the world, hello to the world actually. So this is a valid Java program, and this I'm saving as test.java. So let me save this, and if you run this, let's see what happens actually. um, so I have here the terminal, and my program name is Java test actually. So you require a compiler. Java is both compiled and interpreted. So Java C test.java, and when you compile, so it is compiled successfully. So it's not, the compiler is not giving any errors actually. So it is not notifying anything. So that means it has compiled successfully. Okay, so that means the dot class file has been created for this particular test.java. So test.java is a source file. After compilation you will get actually the bytecode, and bytecode extension is dot class. Okay, so if we can actually see that bytecode generated also, we have actually java p. So to print the bytecodes we have a command called java p. So java p test, actually these are the bytecodes actually. It's compiled from test.java, and we have a class test, and of course default constructor is applied here, and public static void main, and this main contains a string array as a argument. So the string is actually a predefined class which is defined in a package called java.lang. Okay, so these are the bytecodes we can actually see with the java p tool. And if at all you want to see the lower level details of the bytecode. So you can actually say like this Java P hyphen C and what your class file name, that is test. So then actually you can see the lower level details or the next level details of the bytecodes. So it's compiled from test.java, you have a class test, and this is a default constructor codes, then these are the main method codes actually. Okay, so the bytecode has got generated. That's a meaning actually what I meant here. And then you can actually run this particular .class file on any machine. So because Java is platform independent programming language, you can actually take these bytecodes, you can run anywhere. So JVM sitting on top of the operating system of any machine, that may be a Linux machine or Windows machine or Mac, whatever it may be. So that could able to understand the bytecodes, and the JVM actually translates the bytecodes into the underlying hardware native machine language, so that your Java program can run anywhere. So write once and anywhere is the initial slogan of Java. So that actually because of platform independence. So let me run this program. So Java space test, and then actually you can see hello world. So this program is working fine actually. Okay, there is no issue in that. But the question is why we have to write this main method as public static void main. Okay, so now let's actually understand the details. Okay, so what is public? So public actually is an access modifier. Public is an access modifier in Java. And what is static? Static actually is a non-access modifier in Java. So that means both are modifiers only. Both are modifiers. Public is access modifier or access specifier, uh, or we can say access specifier or visibility specifier, whereas static is a non-access modifier. So this is not for visibility or access actually. So uh, you may be knowing actually there are four access specifiers or four visibility specifiers. One I have written already. So other things actually, so there is something called private, and there is something called protected, and we have unspecified. So this is unspecified, so we consider that as unspecified as a default. Okay, so the default specifier. So unspecified or default are not keywords, only private, protected and public are the keywords. If you are not specifying anything, then actually it considered to be unspecified. So I will take up other question, visibility specifiers, access specifiers, and I will explain about all these four, but we limit our discussion here just to public. So public is an access modifier. And why main method must be public? So here public and static are must. Okay, so for the main method, if anything is missing, public is missing or static is missing, the main method is not going to get executed. That means this particular main method, which is intended for JVM, Java virtual machine, is not going to get executed. I will show you uh, I will show you by actually removing public or static and different variations also I will show you. Before we will understand actually why it should be public, and why it must be public, and why it must be static. Okay, so here in Java we have a concept called packages, right? So within a package everything is accessible. That means in a package I have some 10 classes, some interfaces, etc. So now all these class members are accessible from other class. Okay, because they're all in a package. So the default scope actually is a package in Java. So here I didn't specify any package, even though I have not even though I have not mentioned any package. By default we are into a default package. The default package actually is our current directory. So for here my current directory is actually my desktop. So my desktop forms the default package for me. So that means in the desktop whatever all the classes are there, I can access them without any issue actually. Okay, but when you move out of the package, so when you move out of the package, so the things are not accessible. Okay, when you move out of the package, only public members are accessible. Okay, so I have a class in some other package called Y, and I'm in I'm in a package called X. Now I would like to access a member of that particular package Y. I cannot access unless I import that package actually. Okay, so here, so this main method has to be public so that this main can be called outside of the package. Okay, so in Java, who actually calls the main method? Who is responsible to call the main method? JVM is actually responsible to call the main method. So if you remember, or if you see, whenever actually I am invoking this particular I am saying Java test. Okay, Java is interpreter as part of the main method. It is actually calling Java space test. So it is nothing but test dot main. So this is how actually it is in called. The main method is called by JVM with the class name actually. So the main was called actually, main was intended to be called by JVM. Okay, so JVM calls the main method, and JVM is not there in your desktop actually, right? So the JVM was there installed in this machine because JVM is required to execute any Java method, any Java class, any .class file, right? So JVM has to call this main method, and JVM is somewhere else and your program is here. Okay, unless this main method is public, JVM cannot actually call this main. Okay, so this main method should be visible to JVM. Okay, because JVM and this main method, everything are not there in the same package. So this class test actually is there in my desktop or in the default package, and it has to be called by JVM. JVM is not in the desktop, it is somewhere else actually. Okay, so it has to call. So if unless it is public, the main is not available to access for JVM. So that's why main must be public, right? Why main should be public? Because main method has to be called by JVM. It was designed like that in Java. JVM calls main method. Okay, so and JVM is not in your current package, it's somewhere else, right? It should able to access this main method. Only public members are accessible outside of the package. Here you are into a default package. That's why main is public. I think it's clear, right? Second thing is why main method is static. The static is actually a non-access modifier. It is not about visibility. That means whether it is available within the package or outside the package, you don't need to bother about that. So what is static? It's a non-access modifier, and any static method can be called, or accessed directly with the class name. So it can be directly accessed with the class name. So that's why I'm actually saying here, so whenever you are actually calling this particular, whenever you are saying Java space test, it is nothing but test.main, because main is a static method. It can be called by a class actually. Main was there within the class called test, so I can actually call a static method by class name, right? So who is calling? Java. So Java knows, JVM knows that Java is nothing but an interpreter here, which is part of JVM. So JVM knows that the main method is static. Because it is static, you no longer require an object. It can be called directly by a class name. So test.main. Since main is static, so this test.main is actually possible. Okay, so otherwise what actually required is you require to call a method, you require an object. Since a method is static, it can be called directly by a class. So that's actually happening. Okay, so that's why main method must be public and static. Public because JVM has to call it, so main method should be available outside of the package, and it must be static because it has to be called by JVM. It was designed like that, and JVM calls with the class name. So class name is test actually, the executable class name, because it contains the main. So when we are saying test, it's nothing but test.main. Okay, so without creating any object, the method has to be called. That's why main was designed as static. Okay, so I think public and static both are clear, and void is actually return nothing. So any method in C or C++ or Java or whatever the language it may be, so they have to return something back. Okay, so if it is not returning anything, we can say void. Void means nothing, it returns nothing. Okay, so we can have int, a return type int, we can have return type a double, boolean, or any class type. That's actually possible. So main was designed in such a way that it's not going to return anything to the caller. Who is the caller of the main? JVM. So for JVM, main is not returning anything. And here main, so what is main? It's not a keyword actually, and it's not a predefined method, it's a user defined method. Okay, main, even though we have to follow strictly the rule that we have to write main only, even though it is user defined. Usually your user defined names can be anything, but here main, even though it is user defined method, its name actually fixed. Okay, so that also has to be understood. So that's why it is public static void main. Okay, so let me actually um, tell you a few more things here. So what I'm saying, so public and static, so whenever we have public static, then only your program will run properly. So here once again I will show you Java C. I'm compiling actually Java C test.java. So compiled successfully, and that is Java C is Java compiler, and the Java space test. Java is interpreted as part of JVM. Whenever I say Java space test, it is actually calling test dot main method. Test dot main method. Okay. So now it's actually saying hello world. So program working fine. So absence of anything actually. Now what I'm doing is I'm actually removing public. Okay, so I am saving it. So absence of public or static will actually result into an error. But what kind of error actually? Let's see. I have saved that program, so let me compile. So Java C test.java. So compilation has no problem actually. Compilation has no problem. There will be no problem. You can have a main method with static, but that is not the method for JVM. So JVM required method to start the execution of your application, it should be public static, right? So that's why whenever you run, so now actually JVM calling the main method, but JVM finds that, now if you see JVM finds that main method not found in the class test. Please define the main method as public static void main. It is a must actually. Okay, so absence of public actually going to give you a runtime error. This is a runtime error. So it is an error actually. So error is a class that is defined in Java in lang package, and errors are irrecoverable. You cannot do anything. You cannot handle it actually. So you have to go and change your program. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm keeping my public available, but I'm removing static. Okay, so I'm removing the static, I'm saving this again. So let me go back and compile this. So again I think again there will no problem so with compilation, because you can actually have public void main, so there is no problem. But this is not the method intended for JVM. Whenever I am saying JVM call this particular main method of test class, then JVM will actually give me an error. So again it's saying main method is not static in class test, please define the main method as public static void main. So main should be public and main should be static, both together should be present. Okay, so when, because if it is static, then only actually JVM can call that main method of this particular class that was provided to execute. Okay, so now what I am doing is I can actually write like this. So modifiers can be in any order, there is no problem. So now both static is present and public is present, so there is no problem. So JVM wants the main method should be public and static. So public is available and static is available, and there is no problem if the order of the modifiers is changed. Okay, so now if you see just I'm clearing this my terminal. So when I compile, so it compiled successfully, and when I run Java space test, this is nothing but test dot main. So now it is actually printing me hello world. Okay, so that's what actually going to happen. So main method must be public and static, or static public, because order doesn't matter for modifiers in Java. Okay, so now one more thing I would like to tell over here is, yeah, so it can be like this, right? So public static void main, or static public, etc. Now I want to prove that whenever I am saying whenever I say uh, Java space test, it's nothing but test.main, right? So I just want to prove this actually. So how do I prove? How do I prove is, so just listen here. What I'm doing is I'm actually taking some string s equals to some null. Okay, so string s equals to null, and what I'm doing is I have the system.out.println statement here, and in system.out.println what I'm doing is s.length, length. So there is a length method actually which provides me the length or the size of this particular string, but my string s actually is null, so my string object was not initialized, so it is actually a null. But what I'm trying to do is I just want to know the length of this particular string s. So usually what happens actually is, so there is a null pointer exception. So there is a null pointer exception because s is null, but s is not pointing to any object, but you are actually asking the size of that particular object string. So it actually provides a null pointer exception, right? So, but here it actually it gives me the null pointer exception at the runtime. So compilation there will be no issue, but I want to show you JVM actually whenever it is calling the class, main class, the executable class, it is actually calling to the main method of that. So I want to prove that. So let me save this and actually go to the terminal and clear everything. So we will compile it again. So java ctest.java. So compilation there was no issue actually, because compiler don't know about the runtime exceptions. So this runtime exception will happen during the execution of the programs. That means whenever JVM calls this particular test, I'm saying Java space test, it's nothing but test.main, right? So I just want to prove that. So when you actually hit the enter button, so now you can actually see the hello world has got printed here s equal to null and system.out.println s.length. What actually is happening? So whenever this system.out.println statement is getting executed at the line number 9, if you see the line number 9 actually, what is actually happening? Exception in thread main, exception thread main. So there is a null pointer exception which is defined in the lang package, java.lang.null pointer exception at test.main. So this is this is my interest actually. See here, this is my interest. So what I'm saying here, so here whenever you are saying Java test, it is actually going to happen. Okay, so test dot main in parenthesis actually. So test dot Java, in the line number there was a problem. So that means what? Whenever I am saying Java space test, actually it is calling test dot main. Okay, so main is static. That's why we can call actually with the class name. Okay, so this is going to actually um, happen in reality. Okay, so I'm actually clearing these annotations. Yeah. Okay, so ends proved, right? So whenever I'm saying Java space test and test contains a main method, it's nothing but test.main, because test is an executable class. Any class that contains a main method is a main class or executable class actually. Okay, so in order to make this program proper, actually what I need to do is, in order to make this program proper, I actually can define this string s to some string, some actual string actually. So let's say string s equal to Java. Now s is pointing to a string object called Java. Now I can get the length. The length actually is the 4, right? So 4 characters were there. So command s, and now you go back to the terminal and then compile it, java c test.java. So compiled successfully. Whenever you run java space test, now it is saying hello world and s.length actually is 4. Okay, so this is one thing um, to prove that uh, main method must be static and it is called by the class name. Okay, whenever interpreter calls the dot class file, it actually calls the that class is main method, because main method forms the starting point of your program execution. Okay, so one more important thing I just want to tell you is, so for this main method, public and static are mandatory, but so but this main method can actually take 3 more modifiers. Okay, so what are those modifiers? We have a modifier called synchronized. Okay, we have a synchronized modifier, and this works actually. It takes synchronized modifier. Order can be anything. It can be synchronized, public, static. It works actually. So let me actually show you whether it works or not. I have added that, and java test.java, there was no problem, and when I run I am seeing hello world and 4 as the outcome, so it's working fine, right? So now it can also take actually another modifier called final. So your main method can be synchronized, final, public, static. Order can be anything actually. You can actually have permutations, combinations of these modifiers. Okay, let me save this. I have saved this, and again let me compile. So when compiled, it compiled successfully, and when I run, so it is running fine. So hello world and 4, right? So your main method is synchronized, final, and it can be one more thing actually, strict fp. So these are all modifiers. In java there are 14 there are 12 modifiers. Out of them, 4 are visibility modifiers like public, private, protected, and unspecified, which is also called default. And then we have synchronized, final, strict fp, native, volatile, transient, etc. Okay, so I will actually make up one more question on modifiers, and we will discuss things over there. Okay, so your main method can be synchronized, final, strict fp, public, static. Order can be anything. So even this thing is going to work actually. So let me compile. Yeah, so I'm compiling this, and it compiled successfully. When I run, actually it is running properly. Okay, yeah, so the thing here is public and static are mandatory, but synchronized, final, and strict fp are not mandatory. Okay, so they are not mandatory, right? So they are optional. So you can use synchronize if you want, you can use final if you want, you can use strict fp if you want, but this public and static are going to be compulsory, so mandatory. So that's why main should be public and static. Okay, so that's all actually. So I think I have answered why main method is public and static. Okay, so to brief once again at the end, main method should be public such that it can be called by, this method can be called by JVM, because this method you are writing in a class test which is there in some package, your JVM is somewhere else actually, so it has to access this main method out of the package. So out of the package, any member is accessible only when it is declared as public. So main has to be declared public. So main method should be static because it can be called, a static method can be called without requiring an object. We can actually call a static method by class name. So here JVM calls this main method main method directly with the class name. So like test.main here. So or if your class is student, then student dot main actually. Okay, so this is actually going to happen for main method, which is public and static. I think I have answered this question properly, and I hope you liked this answer also. So if you like my answer and my way of explaining the things, you can actually like my channel, you can share my channel, these videos to your friends and your colleagues, and also you can subscribe to my channel, and I will be adding more and more interview questions along with the answers. Thank you. So thanks for your time.